Namaste and welcome to another episode of the Bharatvaarta Weekly. Thank you for choosing to skip the news and watch the weekly. I have with me Srivatsa Subarna and Rohit Jayaraman joining us on this edition of the weekly. Hi Srivatsa, hi Rohit, how are you guys doing?
Hi Roshan, hi Rohit, doing good.
Hi guys, doing pretty well.
Of course, we're lacking some Indori representation in our panel this week.
Heavy South Indian bias
Heavy
today.
South Indian bias, of course. But yeah, we'll have to make do with who we have. So plenty of things happened last week. More importantly, I think it was Sardar Patel Jayanti as well, and certain interesting comments by the Pakistani politicians as well. We'll discuss all of this and more in the following 30 minutes. Feel free to shoot any questions you might have on the live stream. We'll take those at the end. All right. So we also put out a couple of interesting episodes last week. One was a live book discussion, which was extremely engaging. We had record numbers, logging in for the live stream, which was with author Uday Kulkarni on his latest book, The Extraordinary Epoch of Nana Saheb Peshwa. What was it like coordinating this? I'm sure it was quite a thrill to see many people log in at the same time.
Yeah, we had like a record, number of people coming in live, and we also had a lot of people asking questions, on the chat, on Twitter. So that way it was pretty good. The episode itself was amazing, in the sense that to think of someone, who's retired as a surgeon from the armed forces, literally start a second career as a historian and then write books with such amazing detail and depth of information. He talked about some of his visits to libraries in India and abroad, to gather information for writing his books. So, and very, very well hosted by Amit, who himself is pretty knowledgeable about that whole era. So overall I think it was it was one of my most favorite episodes to date.
Right. And we also had this other episode with Rajiv Mantri. It was a deep dive on the Reliance geo phenomena. The year has been pretty extraordinary, and one of the stories that has stuck out or managed to stay in the news for throughout the year, so much so that every couple of weeks we've thought that we've missed the bus on making a Reliance episode as such, right? Was the whole Reliance geo phenomena. And we did a deep dive with investor and author Rajiv Mantri. To me personally, I think it was fascinating to see some of that long-term vision, right? I think people were obsessed about the fundraising, about how the stock is moving and such. But to me, understanding the 5G implications, the plans Reliance has for the future, and the fact that this has been getting baked for quite a while, right? And not something that is on the spur and so on. That grand vision really appealed to me from the episode itself. It was a fantastic episode understanding those facets. All right, so let's move on to the first item of news from this week, right? So we had a few Pakistani politicians take credit for the Pulwama incident that happened, right? One of the ministers on Thursday admitted Pakistan's role in the Pulwama terror attack, bragging that they had entered India and beaten it on its own soil, to quote. The victory in Pulwama is a victory for the people of Pakistan under the leadership of Imran Khan, is what he said, right? What do you think of something like this? I mean, we've had Pakistan deny this, Imran Khan deny this, vehemently earlier. But then, I mean, it was something of an acknowledged truth as such, right? So what is the impact of such a statement?
Frankly speaking, I don't think, in real terms, there is much of an impact. Because at least in India, we know that, Pakistan is a terror state. It has been supporting terrorism, both in Jammu and Kashmir, and has had close links, with the Taliban for a long time. Even Osama bin Laden was found hiding in Pakistan. So none of it should really come in as a surprise that Pakistan as a state would have supported people to come and attack the armed forces in India. The minister Fawad Chaudhry, he tried to spin it around, and we had our own expert journalist, the son of a former cricketer, who, of course, took the opportunity to host an exclusive with Fawad Hussain and helped him, sort of clarify his situation. And he then spun it around to say that he was talking about, the Air Force attack that Pakistan made on India. Subsequently, Abhinandan was captured. Interestingly, as part of that whole exchange, in Pakistani parliament, another politician spoke about the General Bajwa, who heads the armed forces in Pakistan, shaking in his boots and coming and saying that we have to release Commander Abhinandan by 7 p.m. or India will 9 p.m. or India will attack us, or some such time limit. I think that shows that they're really scared of the military might of India, and they know that the current government is not a weak government. It is sort of willing to go the whole distance. If pushed, we primarily want peace, obviously, but if pushed, we are willing to take on the enemy. Fawad Hussain, again, he's been known to do this time and again. So he's had his share of gaffes. So for instance, he said that Pakistan is a thong for BJP and RSS early in the morning. I don't know what he was thinking. Probably predictive text, I guess. Predictive text usually shows up what you're looking for the most right on your phone. So could be something of that sort. He's made claims that the Pakistan launched the Hubble telescope. So overall, he's a loudmouth, and I think this just sort of adds to his list of loudmouth statements and gaps.
Right.
We shouldn't take the statement very seriously, but we know that it's a fact that Pakistan is a terror state and has been doing these kind of things in the past.
Rohit, what do you make of all of those people who were possibly wishing for a Nobel Prize for Imran Khan for releasing Commander Abhinandan?
Yeah, thanks for that, Carrie. I think that's actually the bigger point, and I agree with Vatsa here, right? In the sense that some Pakistani leaders saying that Pakistan was responsible for Pulwama is not really of much consequence from an Indian perspective, because at least in India there was wide consensus on that. But what this whole sorry episode over the last 2 days showed again was literally the number of people in India who don't seem to be on the same page, right? With the government or with what can be called the mainstream national opinion on these kind of issues, starting with whether Pakistan conducted Pulwama or not, whether that's a problem. I mean, Vatsa mentioned about a senior journalist literally lobbing softballs at Fawad Chaudhry and allowing him to sort of spin it. If you go on Twitter, you can see the premier opposition party coming out with inane questions again and again, further muddying the waters, right? I mean, someone like Kanwal Sibal, the former foreign secretary, who, by the way, runs a very interesting Twitter account, unfortunately not yet verified. But he went hammer on tongs again at Shashi Tharoor for asking some inane questions. And I think that's the point here, right? At this point, from an Indian perspective, is everyone in India really even on the same page anymore in terms of tackling Pakistan or Imran Khan? And that's where the whole thing about Imran Khan supposedly getting a Nobel Prize, etc., comes from. Right? It's all coming on the same picture that for a significant section of people, or at least I would say opinion makers and the opposition, is Imran Khan actually a bigger problem than the prime minister? And it seems that that's not the case. Like they're looking for ways to pull down the prime minister, even at the expense of sort of propping up Imran Khan. And again, that's really, I mean, everyone is free to prop up whoever they want, right? I mean, all of us have our interests in various domains. But that's something for everyone else to judge and decide on how to handle or how to interact with these people, right? I mean,
Right. Yeah.
that's about it. I think beyond that, there's no real impact. Everyone's free to do what they want. It's a free country, as you say. But at some point, I think people will start identifying everyone for what they are.
Right. Much as you try to, betray your libertarian tendencies, you just have to rein in some of that, towards the end with. Okay, let me move on from that joke. I mean, I'd probably complete it after the after the weekly, right? All right. So we had, the Prime Minister's interview on Economic Times, right? To the first interview after the pandemic. Some of the key takeaways included a continued vigilance towards COVID, right? Including some protective measures as such. An emphasis on the importance of last mile delivery mechanisms like the direct benefit transfer or the DBT, right? And Interestingly, response to COVID as a whole of the government, whole of the nation, sort of an approach, right? I think which has been a constant sentiment throughout the year. What do you make of this?
So I think, I mean, the interview is pretty detailed. He's spoken about, a lot of things in a lot of detail, starting with the whole coronavirus, and his understanding seems to be quite good in. And he's not pretending to be an expert on medical science or anything of that sort. He's coming at it purely from a number standpoint, and how you've seen states that had fewer infections earlier are now seeing a rise. And he's basically talked about us needing to be careful, because this virus is very fickle and very infectious. More importantly, it tends to spread very quickly. So he's again said that while the numbers are coming down, we need not be complacent. We need to follow safety measures and so on. Then he also spoke about how the government took some of the decisions related to lockdown very early, as compared to other countries where they waited for the cases to go up before a lockdown was enforced. And how the government's efforts over the last 6 years to build last sort of mile delivery mechanisms. And we spoke about some of the other examples, even with Nal Se Jal and so on. That seems to have worked, right? So even though people were confined, uh, poor people got money in their bank accounts. They got access to food, which is very necessary in a situation like that. People who are sort of day wage earners and literally living on a day to day level based on what they earn, for them it was very important that they had access to both money and food in that order. He also talked about some of the reforms that the government has undertaken, so the farm and labor, which we've covered extensively again on Bharatvaarta. And how India has a typical problem in the sense that companies didn't want to hire because the labor laws were so much against them. And the labor laws actually benefited a very very small portion of the nation, right? So it's only about, I think, less than 10, around 10% at most, of India works in the organized sector. The rest of it is unorganized. So the labor laws never really helped most people. uh, he then went on to talk about center state relations, and how the whole GST thing, again something which we've talked about earlier, has been handled with the government borrowing on behalf of the states. And also how the government has increased the allocation to states by around 19% this year. He then went on to talk about some of the improvements on the economic indicators, whether it's agriculture. How they started off with agriculture first, because social distancing was more possible in an agricultural setup than in an office environment. uh, and then he also spoke about something that Smriti Irani ji mentioned when she was on Bharatvaarta, which was how India became a major manufacturer of PPE equipment, and how some of the pharma companies were exporting drugs and so on. uh, so overall he covered a lot of different areas, whether it was the economy, the agriculture sector, the lockdown, the whole pandemic, the government's response. Uh, so I think it was a pretty insightful interview and gave you some idea of how the government is thinking and looking at it overall when it comes to reforms to improve the Indian economy and sort of get us to a stated goal, which is a $5 trillion GDP by 2024, I think.
Yeah. One thing I think that is underappreciated is our capacity to sort of deal with this pandemic at this point of time, right? Whether you look at, a lot of the infrastructure development that has happened leading to the pandemic, or the fiscal prudence, or the fact that we are more of a cashless economy now, or the labor reform, so on and so forth. I think, while there is never a best time for something like this to happen, it probably came at a time when we were much better prepared than any time in history, I would say, right? So, all right, moving on from this. So India on Wednesday came out in strong support of the French president Emmanuel Macron's comments following the beheading of a French school teacher who showed caricatures of the Prophet Muhammad to his students, which following which it caused an uproar in France, right? So some of Macron's comments. Included quote unquote plagued by radical temptations and by a yearning for a reinvented jihad, which is the destruction of the other. Islam is a religion that is in crisis today and all over the world, so on and so forth. This is an important move to preserve Indian and French relations, which have been proven beneficial in the past, right, Rohit? I would love to know your comments on this.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. So I think there are two aspects to this, right? One is what this says about what the statement broadly says about the Indian relationship with France, which is, as you mentioned, something that's really been growing. And the other is what it says about the conception of the Indian state itself, right, under the current government. And they're both equally important, I would say. Because like the first coming to the first one, obviously, I mean, Macron has been under a lot of fire, right? I mean, starting with the Turkish president and the Pakistani prime minister, of course, Imran Khan. Both of them have gone on pretty strongly worded statements against Macron. And in that sense, I mean, there was also a general feeling that Macron did go beyond what has reasonably been considered acceptable in terms of what you just described, right? The way he spoke about certain aspects of radical Islam. And honestly, there wasn't a lot of support for him globally, right? In the sense that none of your, while President Trump said something, leaving that aside, none of the real big European countries put out any strong messages. Well, they all condemned what happened both in Paris and later what happened earlier this week. But nothing really, unequivocally supporting what Macron said, or saying that people shouldn't attack him in intemperate words. Because like Imran Khan spoke about Macron the way he's been speaking about Prime Minister Modi. The fact that there India came and put a really strong statement that shows what we've been saying over the last quite a few episodes on Bharatvaarta, right? How France has actually emerged as India's most reliable ally globally. It's been the case, I think, since 1998. But under Macron, things have become very open, both with Rafale and then that's just the commercial part of it. But even under the whole 370 and then when CAA came, etc., there were a lot of global condemnation. You could see France very strongly support the Indian government, right? And this was really a reciprocation from India, and I think that stands us in good stead. I think, as an aside, I mean, on this podcast, we've discussed in great detail how India keeps getting uh, fairly unfavorable coverage from mainstream English newspapers, right, globally, whether it's American or UK, especially. I mean, your NYT, the WAPO, etc. Today, apparently Macron has said that these guys don't understand anything of what's happening. Their coverage of France has been really disappointing, etc. And that again shows that there's a global move away, right, from this, or at least there's an alternate voice emerging against at least what you could say American woke centrism, which has sort of taken over at least the Anglophone world. But I mean, for a country like India, which depends on at least at the UN Security Council, needs friends, etc. It's a very welcome development, and this is something that India really benefits. I mean, clear statement by India, and I would say that it makes geopolitical sense. And again, coming to the second point on how the Indian state sees itself, that's clearly this thing that I mean, what started with Narasimha Rao opening an embassy in Israel, right? Basically, Indian state has moved again away from allowing its international relations to be held hostage to any group of people's interests in third-party conflicts, right? And obviously, that's always been strong whenever a non-Nehru Gandhi government has been in office. I think Anand Ranganathan put out a tweet on what had happened in 2006, where India actually went to the extent of cancelling a visit by a Danish prime minister. So I think here, of course, this is completely dependent on the government, and if there's a Congress government at the center, this will change. But at least in terms of this government, clear conception of where India's interests lie, and you can argue on whether that's a right approach or not. But at least this was an unambiguous putting it there by the Indian government.
Yeah, if I could just add on to that, I think Rohit made a few very important points. With India's relationship with France changing in '98 when Jacques Chirac was the French president, and we took a multi-sectoral and overall kind of approach to the Indo-France relationship. And the thing is that India and France do share a lot of ideas in common. Whether it's multilateralism, pluralism, and looking at non-military sort of deterrence, rather than going head on into war. The other thing is also that, especially in the Atlantic Ocean, western sort of on the western seas to India, there is France itself has a lot of strategic interests, and uh, we've had sort of joint missions with them. And China is trying to get into that space in the name of trying to prevent piracy and so on. So overall, I think the Indo-French relationship is really strong. It goes across whether it's trade, defense, culture, and so on. So I think it was good that India took a pretty strong stand, and stood with one of its allies who has continuously stood by India, whether we want to get into the nuclear suppliers group or supplying us with, for instance, the Rafale aircraft at such a short notice, which India needs at this point, right, with threats on both its borders.
Right. Great points, both of you. So moving on, uh, the fortification of rice is mandatory, is what the Modi government says, right? Any comments on this specifically, Vatsa?
Yeah, I think it's a good thing in the sense that there is India has a very high anemic rate, and the other thing is most of the food we eat, there is a shortage. There's very few ways for most Indians to get some vital vitamins, like whether it's B12, uh, or iron and so on, because mostly because our food is more sort of grain based and so on. So to that extent, I think it's a great thing that we are looking to fortify some of these grains. Again, there is some mischief being played by some people trying to spin it off as GMO, but this is not really genetically modified food. So we are one of the countries that has very high amount of malnutrition. So to that extent, putting modifying, sort of fortifying rice, wouldn't want to use the term modify, fortifying rice with essential minerals and vitamins, make sure that children at a very young age, because that's when most of the development happens, get access to some of these minerals and vitamins, and and they grow up healthier. So overall, it's a great move.
All right, moving on from this. Well, if I can get my presentation to work. Okay. So during the third edition of the 2+2 dialogues, India and US vowed to ramp up their overall security ties and inked a total of 5 pacts, These pacts allow sharing of high-end military technology, classified satellite data, and cooperation in the fields of nuclear energy and Ayurveda. In a world where more countries are turning increasingly hostile towards China, this move is sure to make waves in global geopolitics as such. Rohit, what are your thoughts on this specifically?
Yeah, sure, Carrie. So I think the key part here is basically the timing, right? In the sense that both the external environment as well as the internal environment in the US, right? Because this is right before an election, and I mean, it's not sure that there'll be an administrative continuity in the US after the election, but the US came here and I mean, both the I mean, the US diplomats turned up and this moved on. And if you look at some of the statements, there was clearly bipartisan agreement, right? I mean, even Democrats like Brad Sherman, etc., have welcomed the agreements, and that shows that there's some continuity in terms of some of these aspects. Well, there may be differing views on certain other points between the two administrations, at least on a broad overall uh, framework on things like, say, military cooperation. There's clearly some bipartisan continuity, which is important because I think India has taken a lot of big moves this year, right, in terms of being more firmly sort of ensconced within the US camp, starting with this move to invite Australia to the Quad, which is definitely, I mean, however much people would like to put it, clearly a sign of India trying to being, not more than trying, being okay with being part of some sort of an explicit anti-China grouping, right, in the Indian Ocean. And India does pay a price for that at some sense, and to that extent, this continuing strategic bipartisan initiative helps India. Another thing that interestingly happened was the US just opened an embassy in the Maldives, and obviously, while the Maldives is a sovereign country, clearly some amount of this thing from India in that, especially considering the current relationships between India and the Maldives post the regime change there, right? So that's another thing where India has sort of been more firmly aligned with the US over the last 1 year with this whole Ladakh forecast, etc. And India's paid a price for it, right? I mean, and that's important to know. Like, there was this whole thing about Vladimir Putin giving a speech where he praised a lot of countries as being up and coming, and there's a very pointed exclusion of India. Obviously, now you can't really go behind and see why Mr. Putin did that. But it wouldn't be outlandish to say that it was some way a sign of disapproval that India has become so close to the US on a lot of fronts. To that extent, it's a matter of importance for India that these things are moving forward at a bipartisan level with the US, and that way it's important. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, especially on the eve of the elections.
Correct.
All right. So Keshubhai Patel passed away last week. He was known as a mentor for many prominent BJP politicians, including the Prime Minister as well. He played a prominent role in organizing LK Advaniji's Rath Yatra in 1990. He held many different positions, including the State Cabinet Minister in 1975 and 1990. And he was the Chief Minister of Gujarat in 1995 and 1998. He's remembered for his powerful style of governance and deep knowledge of Gujarat's demographics. We also had the the birth anniversary of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, the 145th birth anniversary. He was instrumental in unifying British colonial provinces post-independence, earning him the title of Iron Man of India. He established the All India Services System. He's also very well known for Operation Polo, a military operation to integrate the princely state of Hyderabad into India, which we spoke about in our episode with Sri G. Kishan Reddy, right? So we are kind of short on time, but yeah, we have a bunch of these. So Indira Gandhi's Jayanti as well. And coming up next week, we have a couple of episodes, one on the politics of Kashmir and another on economic recovery post-COVID. Vatsa and Rohit, any final comments on the last 3-4 bits of news that I shared? I'm sorry we had to rush because we're short of time. We're terribly short of time. Vatsa?
Yeah, I think Sardar Patel today is his I think 145th birth anniversary. Very very exemplary kind of character. As you mentioned, Kishan Reddy spoke about him in quite detail. How he brought in around 565 sort of princely states across the country and got them into the Indian Union. No mean feat, considering how obstinate and how stubborn and how entitled some of these princes would have been at that time. They would have rather have preferred to have a small kingdom of their own than merge into a democracy. He I mean, he had so many characteristics, in the sense that he was a lawyer and a very successful one at that. He was also very important in terms of fundraising for the Congress. He again played a critical role even in the non-cooperation movement in the 1920s. uh, and obviously, post partition, what he's done is known to everyone, in the sense that whether it was division of physical assets, or making sure that people moved from one country to another as safely as possible, and then getting in all of these difficult sort of rulers into the Indian Union. Hyderabad being a special example, where the Razakar army had to be fought by the Indian army, and they had to be brought under Indian rule. He is also known for setting up the civil services in India. Um so I mean, there is it's the only thing I would say is it was kind of unfortunate that he was overlooked for the highest civilian honor, which is the Bharat Ratna, and he got it only when PV Narasimha Rao became the prime minister in 1991. I think the Statue of Unity is a great tribute to someone who's done a lot for the country and was not recognized for a very, very long time by the ruling disposition in India.
Right. All right. That's it from us at Bharatvaarta. Thank you for.
I think you're on mute, Carrie.
No, I don't think I'm on mute. Can you hear
Okay.
me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Almost had me, huh? What's up? Anyway, thank you so much for watching the weekly with us. We'll be back with more good content the following week. Let us know what you thought of it, both the good and the bad and the ugly, whatever it is. And we'll improve our content as well. So thank you so much.